Hi, it's Scott Bywater here, and I'm here at the beautiful Fairy Meadow Beach, and today I just want to share my story with you. I guess my business story and where I started, and where I've obviously am at today. So I really started out as a middle class sort of upbringing. My family, my parents were, probably average in terms of income and that sort of thing. One of the things which, whenever we went on holidays, and we did tend to go on holidays every year or two, probably every year, my father had this, my father was a great dad, but he had something about, at the end of the holidays, he would always say, now we're going to have to work hard for the next 12 months and we've spent all our money and all that sort of thing. So it sort of put me off the concept of having holidays, and as a result, until I met my wife Helen, I didn't have a holiday at all for years after I left school. So I sort of came with my fair share of baggage, as most of us do. And when I got out of school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't have any idea really of what my next step was. So I fell into this. I just knew I wanted to get out. So I jumped on a train one day while my parents were in Fiji when I was about 17, and I ended up going over to Sydney and living at a backpacker's place, and got a job as a door-to-door salesperson. So the interesting thing about that was, although people might say now, I'm good at sales or good at selling, if you've read my emails on that, I started out and I was absolutely terrible. I was probably the worst salesperson in the office, and I nearly got fired from that job. I was just lucky enough to one day stumble on a group of people, and they wanted these cleaning chemicals that I was selling, and they decided to take advantage of the cleaning chemicals. And as a result of that, I kept my job, but then I left it a week later and got into banana farming of all things. I jumped on the phone and made 50 cold calls to a banana farmer, or to banana farmers, and using my skills I'd learned in door-to-door sales, and got a job at $5 an hour, working very hard. I wasn't carrying bananas and that at age of 17 or whatever I was, but I was working very hard. So one day I saw a job for telemarketer. I think it was at the Centrelink office, and it was $10 an hour instead of $5 an hour. And I thought, air conditioning and $10 an hour, banana farming $5 an hour. So I got into the telemarketing, the world of telemarketing. And what happened while I was telemarketing was, I started off terrible. I didn't sell anything in my first week, but then I came across, luckily I didn't have a car. I ran into a guy called Ray, who was the best salesperson in the office, and he would take me to and from work. And during that time I learnt the power of asking questions. I was hungry for knowledge. So what I would do, I'd ask him, how do you get all these referrals? How do you close the sales? How do you do this? And I learned things about creating picture copy and helping the customer see themselves in that situation. I learned about asking for referrals. I learned about all these things, and as a result, I ended up moving to Sydney soon after, and I became the best salesperson in the office. And that taught me a big lesson about the power of modelling and the power of having a coach at a very early age. Now, what happened after that? I travelled and I bummed around a fair bit. At age 19, I actually went to a Jay Abraham seminar. I think it was age 19, and a light bulb went off in my head because I saw the power of marketing and the power for leverage. Because for me, the idea of having a business where all you're doing is work, and struggle, and not that relaxation was sort of pointless, because my belief is that the business should be there to support your life. While we all love what we do, we also want a good lifestyle, and we also want to support our children and send them to great schools and go on holidays and show them experiences. At least that's what drives me. Everyone's driven by by different different things, but be able to have our life as our own is really critical. So that was quite powerful. But it wasn't until probably around the age of 24, I had different sales jobs, and I went and I was a hippie in Byron Bay for a while. I joined a cult. I did all sorts of weird explorative things when you are at that age. But there was a certain time when I decided, I actually went to, I think it was a Brad Sugar's seminar, and I decided to start up in a business, get a business cheap, build it up, and then sell it off and make a bucket load of money. At least that was the idea. But then reality hit. We started up this business, and we did some pretty good things from a marketing perspective, but we had cash flow issues. We started with no money. We had issues with staffing. We had all sorts of of problems, and plus the beginning of business, we weren't that experienced. So push come to shove, that sort of business failed, and I found myself almost, I was worried about being homeless, because I'd already asked for several $1,000s from my mother to get myself out of that pickle, when the company where we had the business actually came in one day. I got a call from my staff member in hysterics saying, Scott, they've shut the doors, they've locked the doors. So I had to find from my mother, which is I guess quite embarrassing, but I had to find about $8,000 or $9,000 to keep the doors open, and then it kept going, and we sold the business for next to nothing within a month or two later, with the main purpose being that we didn't have to hold on to a lease and that, because we really couldn't afford to keep running it. So that was my introduction to business, and it sort of sucked. I remembered calling my mother up and crying. I remembered being in tears. I remembered the intense pain. I remember driving with my wife one day and just breaking down in tears. She wasn't my wife then. I'd only we'd only been together for a couple of months. But that's the sort of the sort of things I went through in the early days, and it was quite painful. From there, what I did is I basically I managed to find a place to rent, and it was like a halfway house with sort of probably drug addicts and all sorts of things in that house, and I was still worried about how was I going to pay the bills each week, how was I going to pay the bills. So luckily enough, I managed to get out of that house, and I moved in with my wife with still the fear of how am I going to pay the bills. I managed to find a client to give some stability to the income, and then there was a stage where I actually saw a job interview, not a job interview, a job opportunity, and my wife said, and it was about copywriting, and my wife said, you must go for that job. My wife's got some sort of a gut feeling or a sixth sense about a lot of things, and which is really quite incredible. But she said, you must go for that job. So I did. I wrote them a letter. I got an interview. Push come to shove, the copywriting lady liked me. The recruitment lady thought I was terrible, because she put me through this grueling interview where she carved me, and apparently I've learned since that that's a HR technique, but she carved up all my experience trying to find the flaws, because obviously I'd done a lot of things, and I wasn't overly stable as an employee at that time. So anyway, I got into copywriting, and I had this sort of specialty, and it got known. I realized the power of specialization, and as a result of that, I started to get clients, and really good clients, and I built it up. Then there came a period where I built it up to a decent, to a really decent level, and then I was basically maxed out. So I got to a period where it's like, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do to get over this hurdle? And that's when I started to move into the product creation phase and all of that, all of that sort of thing. And I also asked the question, what's my overriding purpose? Why do I want to build a business? And really, there's a few things. And the number one thing is to help business owners, and that includes myself, and everyone that I'm in contact with through newsletters and through my coaching programs, that sort of thing, build their ultimate lifestyle. Because I believe that business is about creating an ultimate lifestyle, to be able to A, deal with customers you like rather than tire kickers or time wasters or people who don't really appreciate what you've got to offer. That just makes business enjoyable. To have customers come to you rather than you having to chase after customers and who price shop you or try and deal with you in a way where you're seen as a commodity, really. So setting up the system so that that's possible, and to have the leverage where, for instance, instead of cold calling or having 1,000 people visit your website and no one responding or no one expressing any interest, to have the leverage where you can make small shifts and make 10 or 20 times improvements as a result of those small shifts. So that sort of thing, I think, is massive, because one of my early business name was a marketing alchemist, and not many people got that, because it was it was kind of a bit weird, and what's an alchemist and all that sort of thing, probably from my hippie and cult days that name come from. But that was one of my earliest business names, and the reason I chose that initially was because it's like turning metal into gold. If you can turn an ad that's just breaking even and you're spending $1,000 a month on to an ad that's turning over $2,000 a month, then you've got double you've effectively turned metal into gold. You're turning something less valuable into something more valuable. And there's so many opportunities within our businesses to be able to do this sort of thing. And ultimately, what's it all about? I mean, for me, everyone's different, but for me, it's all about being able to take time off, to be able to take time off work and go on a holiday, to be able to have what's called there's a book written called The Power of Full Engagement. We have full engagement when you're there, but then be able to take a week off every 3 months or 2 weeks off every 3 months and have a break and chill out and that sort of thing. And to be able to take a holiday off at the end of the year, and to be able to go out to a restaurant and not have to worry about what the price of the bill's going to be. And that's a sort of leverage that effective marketing and effective business skills can give you. Now, we've been running the business over the next couple of weeks. We're going to launch the More Time at the Beach Gold program, and you're also going to get. I wanted to really give you some good content up in between now and then. So I'm going to be sharing some videos from inside some of the mastermind sessions, and I'm going to be sharing some of the things which people who are in the program have to say. But I just encourage you. I give this analogy. I was talking to a friend recently, and he was talking about rock climbing and the first time he rock climbed, and he was going through all these emotions. He was going through exhilaration, excitement. And then a big one was fear. And he said if he could have just looked up and known that there was people supporting him, that's what kept him going. He could look up and see that there was people supporting him up there to really get to where he wanted to the top of the rocks. So the same goes in business. We go through all these emotions. I know over the years I've had I'll be up one day and feel like, hey, I'm going great, and then I'll be riddled with anxiety the next day and be worried about anything from cash flow to staffing issues to all of this sort of thing, or that that something has gone wrong with a client or a project or whatever. So we go through all of these emotions, and it just really helps to have people there that are supporting you. So thanks for listening, and thanks for allowing me to sort of share my story with you. I think you've probably got a similar story in one way or other, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll be emailing you or talking to you soon. Okay, cheers for now.